We're in the book of Exodus, chapter 15, verse 22. When I last taught here, I talked about the exit of the nation of Israel from Egypt and the crossing of the Red Sea. God did ever so many demonstrations of his power to the Egyptians and to Israel. And still, Egypt was willing to attack them at the Red Sea. And the Israelites were doubting whether or not God was going to save them again. As we know, God did save them again and demonstrated great power over the wind and the sea to defeat Pharaoh and reduce Pharaoh's power in the bargain. Now we're going to learn about the journey of the nation to Mount Sinai. Chapter 15, verse 22. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea. Then they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Now when they came to Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he cast it into the waters were made sweet. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them, and there he tested them. The wilderness of Shur is a very dry place, and is actually the region where the angel of God found Hagar and Ishmael after they had been sent away by Abraham. In this instance, the complaining of the Jews was not as loud as it would get later. But remember, they had just seen the destruction of Pharaoh's army, and just a few days ago, God told Moses to cast a tree into the water to make it drinkable. What you can see in this and in other stories is that God uses many ways to accomplish his miracles. I think that the reason for this is to demonstrate that the miracle is God. It's not the process by which the miracle is accomplished. Verse 26. If you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the waters. So God's promising not to visit the diseases that were inflicted on the Egyptians, on the Jews. But he does add a requirement. He adds the requirement that they follow his commands and statutes. God's certainly the ultimate physician, but mankind to this day has not been able to fill this requirement. Elim must have been a great relief to the people in that there were trees and water. Trees and wells of water in the wilderness are often compared to salvation. Chapter 16. And they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they departed from the land of Egypt. Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Again. They're after him again. We've been reading a little booklet that a lot of us have been reading about the 23rd Psalm, and written by a shepherd about how he takes care of sheep. And this business with them always being after Moses, it strikes me as a herd of sheep. buying and carrying on all the time. It's not biblical, it's just opinion. Okay, verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. And it shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. The actual location of the wilderness of sin is unknown. The text tells us it's between Elim and Sinai. But that doesn't help that much because we don't really know where Sinai is. We think it's in the southern end of the Sinai Peninsula, but some others argue that it's over in the Arabian Peninsula. So who knows just where it is. Anyway, wilderness of sin is just the name of the area they were traveling through and has nothing to do with what we now call sin. I didn't jump ahead, did I? No. The dates that he's talking about are now being recorded as being so long from the departure from Egypt. Remember, dates were then recorded as the departure from Egypt, similar to how we now record dates as from the birth of Jesus. The phrase, the whole congregation, is a generality and should be taken as the majority of the congregation. After all the things God's done for them, why did they think he was going to abandon or kill them in this wilderness? Did they doubt his ability to feed and water them? It's like sheep. What have you done for me lately? Okay, verse 4. Behold, the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. It shall be on the 6th day they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. So God says to Moses he's going to shower bread onto the people, but they could only gather enough for each day, except on the 6th day they should gather enough for 2 days to account for the Sabbath when no work should be done. By doing this, the people would learn to trust God each day, that he would supply their needs on the next day. It's a trust issue. Verse 6. Then Moses and Aaron said to all the children of Israel, At evening you shall know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your complaints against the Lord. But what are we that you complain against us? Also Moses said, This shall be seen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning bread to the full. For the Lord hears your complaints which you make against him. And what are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses spoke to Aaron, Say to all the congregation of the children of Israel, Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints. Now it came to pass, as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. So this is going to be a whole new thing. They'd seen the power of God in the 10 plagues against Egypt, and again in the crossing of the Red Sea, which could perhaps be named the 11th plague. Now God was going to supply their food every day in a way that is new to all of them. We could certainly say that God supplies our daily bread to this day, but this was going to be something much more direct and a very close connection between God and the people. That's never been seen before or since. Aaron drew the people to him. While he was speaking, the people saw the glory of God in the cloud over the wilderness. We're not told what that glory looked like, but it surely made an impression on them. Verse 11. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the complaints of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So it was that quails came up in the evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. So when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, What is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, This is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is the thing which the Lord has commanded. Let every man gather it according to each one's need, 1 omer for each person, according to the number of persons. Let every man take for those who are in his tent. So God, through Moses, is now promising meat in the evening and bread in the morning. Not bad. Now, quails do migrate through this part of the desert, but the timing was certainly arranged by God. And not to put too fine a point on it, God designed the act of migration in the first place, as he did everything else. Many people have tried to figure out what manna is by trying to identify a modern thing that would answer this description, but they've failed. I think it was because there is no modern substance that corresponds to the manna supplied by God. It looked so strange that Moses had to tell the people that this was the food provided by God for their morning bread. Everyone was to gather enough for the people in his tent. That works out to about 2 quarts for each person, if I figured out an omer correctly. Not Homer Simpson, but Homer, whatever. Okay, 17. Then the children of Israel did so and gathered, some more, some less. So when they measured it by omers, he who gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man had gathered according to each one's need. And Moses said, Let no one leave any of it till morning. Notwithstanding this, they did not heed Moses, but some of them left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them, so they gathered it every morning, every man according to his need, and when the sun became hot, it melted. So everyone gathers the manna to be consumed during the day, and they were instructed not to keep it beyond the day. But of course, somebody had to try keeping it overnight. In the morning, it was full of worms and didn't smell good. Couldn't be eaten. Also, when the hot sun hit the ungathered manna, it melted. In this way, God's teaching the nation to trust what he would supply their needs on a daily basis. Also, to get up early in the morning and gather the manna before it dissolves. Verse 22. And so it was on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. Then he said to them, This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake today, and boil what you will boil, and lay up for yourselves all that remains, to be kept until morning. So they laid up till morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink, nor were there any worms in it. Then Moses said, "Eat that today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none." Now it happened, as you can guess, that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore he gives you on the 6th day bread for 2 days. Let every man remain in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. So no manna appeared on the Sabbath. Well, the whole thing is from God, and God created the Sabbath, so he's going to take a break as well. The people had been instructed to gather 2 portions on the 6th day. When they did, it didn't spoil, just as promised. Some people went out to gather on the 6th day, and there wasn't any. There's always someone who doesn't get the word, and that person seems to always be out of step with the rest of the world. Verse 31. And the house of Israel called its name manna, and it was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. The Lord of the Rings fans think of lambus bread. Then Moses said, "This is the thing which the Lord has commanded. Fill an omer with it to be kept for your generations, that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a pot and put an omer of manna in it, and lay it up before the Lord to be kept for your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron laid it up before the testimony to be kept. And the children of Israel ate manna 40 years, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is 1/10 of an ephah, which I don't find particularly helpful. It sounds like manna was very tasty. Also must have been very nutritious, as it sustained the nation of Israel for over 40 years. The pot of manna was saved as a memorial, and it never rotted. This was a minor miracle, as the rest of the manna rotted in a day or 2 days in the case of the Sabbath. 1 omer of manna was put in a pot and kept as a memorial of the provision of God for the nation while it was in the wilderness, for what turned out to be 40 years until they crossed into Canaan. That's another story. Chapter 17. Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people contended with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." So Moses said to them, "Why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord?" And the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why is it you brought us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Here are the people again accusing God of bringing them out of Egypt to kill them in the desert. The word for complaint in this instance is more serious than in chapter 15. And we should remember there are a lot of people and a lot of livestock in the group. Personally, I don't understand why they didn't just ask politely. Go up to Moses and say, "Please ask God for water so we can feed our livestock and we won't be thirsty." It appears that they're still not trusting Moses and God to take care of them. I like to think that I would have been more reasonable in the circumstances, but I wasn't there. Verse 4. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people? They're almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said, growing up in the 60s, stone meant something else entirely. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on before the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod which you struck the river, and go. Behold, I will stand before you here on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, and the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel, so he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Moses, being instructed to take some and not all of the elders with him, would seem to indicate that not all of the people were complaining. We can hope that. He's told to take the rod that he has been using for this whole adventure. Remember, it's the rod that turned into a snake and then back into a rod, also the same rod that he held out over the Red Sea, among other things. As instructed, he struck the rock, and water rushed out to satisfy the needs of the people. I'm sure that God was going to provide water for the people in any case, but the people complaining to Moses sounded a sour note in the process and turned it from a celebration of God's provision into something less. Can it be that this incident is a lesson for us to wait on God's timing for provision rather than questioning God's plan for us? Give me patience and give it to me right now. Verse 8. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy. And they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, up one on one side and one on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Now the people of Amalek were descendants of Esau, who was the other son of Isaac, who sold his birthright to Jacob, the second son. Esau born first, Jacob born second. And Esau sells his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew. This is the first mention of Joshua, and this battle may be serving as training for his role later in the story. Moses holding up his hand was not magic. God was with him anyway. Holding up his hand with or without his rod in it was a sign that God was supporting the nation of Israel in this battle, and the people took heart in that indication. Verse 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called its name, "The Lord is my banner." For he said, "Because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." Building an altar becomes a regular way for the nation of Israel to recognize and memorialize a place or an incident that was very important. The book God is referring to is actually a scroll. Books as we know them were not invented until much later. The first 5 books of the Bible are often referred to as being written by Moses and are sometimes called the books of Moses. There's discussion among scholars about whether or not they were actually written by Moses or were they spoken by Moses and later written by somebody who the oral history was passed down to. I'm sure he at least wrote some of them, and in any case, It's the Word of God. God said to write this down so you don't forget it. Chapter 18. Jethro's advice. This is not Jethro Clampett. And Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he'd sent her back with her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I've been a stranger in a foreign land, and the name of the other was Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. Now he said to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife, her 2 sons with her. This appears to be, nope, that's the wrong one. Even before the internet, before newspapers, and before even books, news travels around. And Jethro decided to see for himself, and brought along Moses' wife and his 2 sons, so that they could see this wonderful thing. Zipporah had apparently returned to her father after the incident at the beginning of Moses' return to Egypt, where God was mad at Moses for not circumcising his sons in the prescribed Jewish manner. Verse 7. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down, and kissed him, and they asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Jethro, this appears to be quite a formal meeting. And the bowing down and the kissing, that's not worship. It's a sign of respect. In this society, the power of the family rested with the most senior members, and Moses was observing the proper rituals. Jethro appears to have been exposed to God, perhaps by Moses when he was living in Midian, but he appears to have classified God as one among many gods, and not more powerful than the others. Living in the same region as Egypt, he would have been exposed to their religious system. His opinion was now changed. I'm sure that he's referring to the many Egyptian gods that were trampled on by the 10 plagues in their country. Jethro making a sacrifice to God is another indication of his respect for God. Verse 13. And so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, What is this thing that you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit, and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God, when they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws. So Moses' father-in-law said to him, The thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out. For this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for the people so that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. Let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. So Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, rulers of tens. So they judged the people at all times. The hard cases they brought to Moses, but they judged every small case themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way to his own land. So Moses is trying to be the perfect leader of the people. That is obviously impossible. Considering the size of the nation, we've heard millions, there's bound to be conflicts that arise. The task would be Herculean and impossible for any human man to accomplish. These suggestions of Jethro make a lot of sense. The divisions listed here sound similar to the breakdown of the Roman army that would come into being much later in the story. Could have descended from this, but it makes a lot of sense. Chapter 19. In the 3rd month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai, for they had departed from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. This was exactly 2 months after leaving Egypt. This is the same area where God had first confronted Moses with the burning bush. God had promised that they would worship him on the mountain, and here they were. Verse 3. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. Now, Moses is the only one that has direct access to God. So he had to be the one to go up onto the mountain. It boggles my mind to think how difficult it must have been to try to mediate between the nation of Israel and God. These are the same people who accused God over and over of bringing them into the wilderness in order to kill him. Today, we would not think of a 2-month journey of perhaps 150 miles to be very fast or on the wings of eagles. In Old Testament times, when the journey was accomplished on foot, it looked very different. This is also the first time in Exodus where the term covenant is used. This is not the first covenant, as the term was used to describe the bargain with Abraham in Genesis. At this point, what do we think of Moses? God drafted him when he was tending sheep in the same wilderness and sent him to confront Pharaoh. Moses did that and continued to follow God's commands right on through. He's been described as a sort of Christ in that he rescued the nation of Israel, And he certainly has displayed Christ-like patience in his dealings with the rebellious nation. And he's followed God's commands so far. I have a couple of quotations. I always have quotations from what these people think of Moses. From Skip Heitzig. He's always been supportive and encouraging, but I didn't always think so. He's talking about his father-in-law. In the early days of my marriage, I wondered about ulterior motives and competitive intentions, but that was all a reflection of my own insecurities. Moses may have felt the same way. He no doubt wanted to impress Jethro, his father-in-law, so he took him to work. Jethro watched all day as his son-in-law filled the role of problem shuffler for Israel. He must have heard it all, from so-and-so stole my sheep to he snores and wakes up our neighbors in the next tent. Moses was trying to meet too many needs of too many people alone. Jethro was a good father-in-law. He gave Moses a golden principle. No one person, no matter how gifted, can do ministry alone. He watched as his son-in-law tried to wear the hats of the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branches of government. By the end of the day, he was worn out. Jethro's advice was to delegate, find other capable people to help. So Moses did, and he discovered that he got more done and made everyone else happier. Dwight Moody. Moses spent 40 years in the king's palace thinking he was somebody. Then he lived 40 years in the wilderness, finding out that without God, he was nobody. Finally, he spent 40 more years discovering how a nobody with God can be somebody. And then Golda Meir. Golda Meir says, "Let me tell you something that we Israelis have against Moses. He took us 40 years through the desert in order to bring us to the one spot in the Middle East that has no oil." I'm sure there was a reason for that. Yeah. So here we are. Israel is now at Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. Much is going to happen here, and many trials and many successes will happen. Whenever I teach next, we'll go into those. Let's pray. God, thank you for Moses. Thank you for this story of how one man can accomplish many great things by following you. Help us to do that in our everyday lives, and also help us not to complain as sheep complain to the shepherd. In the name of your Son we ask. Amen.